Hi and welcome to this, the first episode of the FBU Podcast. Yep, from now on, the Fire Brigade Union is going to be bringing you news, analysis and conversation via our new podcast. We're going to be sitting down with firefighters, FBU reps and activists from across the Labour movement and indeed across the world. Each episode we aim to bring you compelling discussions from the front lines of firefighting, the highs, the lows and everything in between. My name's Tam McFarlane. I'm the National Officer for the Fire Brigade Union and I'm delighted to say I'm going to be your host in this podcast. As I said, I'm a National Officer for the FBU, but before that I was a whole-time firefighter for many years, too many to mention, in Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. In today's episode, we're going to be crossing the Atlantic and speaking to Joe Ten Eyck, who's a firefighter from the USA and project manager in our sister union, the International Association of Firefighters, a specialist in wildfire and urban interface programmes. We're also going to be joined by watch manager Jamie Kelly, a firefighter from Portsmouth, and indeed the Brigade Secretary for the Fire Brigade Union in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And stay tuned, because later on in this episode, we're going to be joined by our new General Secretary, Steve Wright, the first interview for the FBU that Steve has given. For all of you FBU members out there, if you've read in the latest edition of Firefighter, the FBU Journal, you'll have read a significant feature on what we call the California Inferno, because on the 7th of January this year, high winds ripped right across the landscape of Southern California and created conditions for what, if any of you saw it on the television, seemed to be the most destructive wildfire in recent history over that period. Now, we're going to be joined by a former incident commander, Joe Ten Eyck, who's also the IAFF Wildlife and Urban Interface Fire Programmes Coordinator. Joe, very welcome indeed, and it's great to talk to you. Clearly a significant moment in American firefighting history, really, over there. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long did you join the service and how did you find yourself in this position within the IAFF?
My pleasure, and it goes without saying, very nice to be here, and thank you for having me, and I'm very pleased to be able to spend some time with you. My official title now is Director, Wildfire Urban Interface Fire Programs for the International Association of Firefighters. I'm a retired CAL FIRE Operations Chief, retired actually as a Division Chief, but over 35 years of experience in the department. I have over 40 within the fire service. I started in a small community in the foothills of Northern California outside of Sacramento called Penn Valley when I was a teenager. And I fell in love with it. I had fantastic members, folks that were retired from the city of San Francisco Fire Department, and they took the time to get around a teenager and impart their knowledge and their wisdom to me and made it me fall in love with it. And I left to go serve in the United States Marine Corps after high school. But I didn't re-enlist. I had a lot of pressure to re-enlist and a lot of things thrown at me, but I wanted to go back to that first love, and it's a great opportunity to serve not only the 355,000 uniformed professionals in the International Association of Firefighters, but it's also a fantastic opportunity to do collaborative efforts to safeguard the safeguarders, the firefighters, while they safeguard the community all over the world. And so we have so much in common and wanting the same things with folks over in the United Kingdom, that this just makes complete sense there and in other places to partner up and join. And I believe that these podcasts are also good because you're also educating firefighters and the public as well. And the main thing and the plain thing is safe, competent response to keep our people out of burn centers and cemeteries, and to be able to take care of the public and their communities and all the beauty around, which we call resource values at risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Joe. Now, we've got very close associations with the IAFF, the Fire Brigade Union, and the IAFF, for all the listeners out there who don't know, it's the International Association of Firefighters, the primary union for firefighters not just in the USA, of course, but also for Canada. Now, Joe, going back to the wildfires that struck there, you were a long-term firefighter, you know the area. It seemed utterly extraordinary watching those pictures from this side of the Atlantic. How unprecedented were these fires in your experience?
It's unprecedented in the sense of the destruction in an area. The acreage in itself, we've had many fires that are significantly larger, but where this location was, and the amount of infrastructure damage in the billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, is different than when these incidents are occurring in areas that aren't as urbanized. And so the threat's still there. I've seen this type of fire behavior many times over the years, more times than I can count. The difference is that we really have a fire year now versus a fire season. And then in California, but also in the United States and Canada, that's happening too. The shoulder seasons everything are starting earlier and lasting longer. And from the colleagues over there in Great Britain that I've talked to, you're experiencing the same thing. And so when we saw this, it was a Santa Ana wind event, and a scientific name for that is a foehn wind. It's a friction wind. Up north, we call it an easterly or a north wind, and it came and it had category 1 or 2 hurricane strength up on the ridge tops, and tropical storm to the point where our air resources were not able to fly in support of those operations, and perimeter control was almost negligible. So what the fire service partnering up with law enforcement did was they were focusing on evacuation or rescue, whether it's out of the incident or the temporary refuge areas, and then structure defense were the main priorities during the incident.
It's interesting you use the term hurricane, because in our recent firefighter article, we quote a person called Captain Jerry Pugh, who's a 22-year veteran of the LAFD, and he describes it as a hurricane. He says, "I've never seen anything like it. It was like battling a hurricane, but instead of water, it was flames." I mean, that's a very vivid picture that Jerry painted there. Now, you mentioned that you couldn't get air support because of the winds.
Yes.
And we also understand there was a significant challenge with cars that had been abandoned, which prevented access to the fire sites. I mean, how significant a challenge was that for the firefighters?
It's a big challenge. Once the wind speed gets to a certain point, air resources become ineffective, and then it flat out becomes just unsafe for them to fly. And then for the ground resources, ingress and egress, I was looking at what they called a fire that happened over there in 1961. And there's a study that was titled "The Worst Fire in the History of Los Angeles." And the acreage was significantly less. There was a lot of damage. What was interesting is the population was less than half of what it is in Los Angeles now. But they had more firefighters working for the Los Angeles City Fire Department back in 1961, 64 years ago, than they do now. Now, where I'm going with this is the infrastructure, the population has grown. The road systems haven't necessarily grown with it in a lot of the places there in the Palisades and the Eaton. So you have more people, but you got the same 2-lane roads without a middle lane, a suicide lane that you can make for evacuation. So it made ingress and egress more challenging, and so egress evacuation as well, and then it got log jammed up to the point where some places they had to leave their vehicles. And we actually had to have tracked vehicles, bulldozers, pushing vehicles out of the way so that fire and law enforcement could access the incident to do rescue or structure defense. So it slowed it down. So it really illustrates the importance of identifying these things and as we grow with it, because it's a challenge, and that's not unlike any place else. So that's not unique to California. If you were to go over to the East Coast or over where you're at, you're going to see a lot of places where the population's grown, but the road system hasn't grown with it.
And I think that's something that's hard to get across, isn't it? I mean, for listeners who perhaps haven't tackled fires of this magnitude. Now, I was a rural firefighter myself. I served in the southwest of England. Came across many rural fires, but nothing on this scale, I have to say. Who has? But it looked virtually impossible to firefight. I take it you just had to concentrate on evacuation, rescue, do everything you can to get people out and try and protect property.
Yes, and that's always that's the exact number one. And rural areas have their own unique challenges over urban areas as well too. And with that being response times, what we call reflex time. And then the other part about it is the training component as well. There is a 88% of the fire agencies, that number may have gone left or right a percentage or two, but we're close, are going to be responding to these types of incidents. But only about 40% of them have any training in it. Yeah. And out of that 40%, a lot of that is insufficient. And so that's where we came up with the response to the interface training. I've seen this same type of fire behavior before. I've seen it going back to 1988. We had these phone wind events. Then also in 2003, I was up in rural areas of Northern California. I had the honeydew incident to where when the flames burned downhill and hit the ocean, they were shearing out 200 feet over the waves. It sounded like a freight train when it was coming through. The difference is you take that same fire behavior and you apply it in the city of Los Angeles, the second biggest metropolitan area in the United States. And it makes a complexity to it that you don't have in a more rural environment. That life safety, that property conservation, because people's livelihoods, the economic stability of the region depend upon the fire service and law enforcement working in concert to safeguard it. If you know that you're going to have wind events in advance, you pre-position resources, you put on what we call staffing patterns to hold personnel on duty. And that way we can lessen damage, we can assess risk. This fire was going to burn how it was going to burn regardless of that. But for firefighter safety, we got to make sure that we do everything we can so that we know that on our end, we were as prepared as we could. And the training component of it is huge.
No, I think training's a very important issue, isn't it? And when you were describing some of the circumstances that firefighters faced, I mean, if that wind had turned a different direction and firefighters there, the story could have been so different.
Yes.
In your view, how do you train firefighters to recognise these conditions, recognise the situations they could face? What level of training is necessary, especially in these changing times?
Yeah, we have to be students of fire behavior. It's just as important in this environment as it is in the municipal environment. You'll hear people in the municipal environment on a structured fire talk about reading the building so they can plan for current and expected behavior of the fire. And so how do we do that? We basically got to turn into weather geeks in a lot of ways. We keep informed on weather conditions and forecasts because that's going to help us decide what we're going to do in planning meetings when we get the operations chief and the plants chief and the incident safety officer in the room together, and the operations chief puts on the board the things that he needs to do or she needs to do to establish containment leading to control. And then the safety officer is outlining all the hazards and life safety things and then they got to be able to, okay, you want to do this, then this is the mitigation you got to do before you can do that. So you get into that in the initial phases of the incident, the first 24, 48 hours, those things are being done a lot of times behind a pickup in a command vehicle or when we gather a room together. But once they build out, then that's part of the regular routine. You get from the upper leadership, the agency administrator, what the objectives are, management objectives. And then you take those, and it can be broad. Keep the incident out of here, protect this infrastructure, life safety, property conservation. But then once you get that leader's intent, then you take that and you develop strategic objectives to the incident. And then out of that flows your tactical applications. I'm going to contain this site, so I'm going to do a backfire burning operation, those types of things on what you're going to do.
Joe, you talked in great detail there. It was fascinating to hear about your ideas around the training programs, the objectives and analysis of that as well, and the application of it. Is this getting applied in the fire services across the US? Are firefighters getting trained in the manner that you set out? And also, is there a national program for this type of training for this type of firefighting?
Not all firefighters are getting trained in this environment up to the level they need to be. And that's one of the things that the IFF identified, which is why they created a position that I hold right now. And then we developed responding to the interface for an operational or a train-to-trainer program as well. And one of the things that needs to happen is that a lot of the training folks get is just specifically tailored to wildfire training. It's not the all hazard, all risk training environment. And it's really important that we have that, because this is all about the incident within the incident. You need to have knowledge of operations in structural firefighting, in hazardous materials, in high-low angle rescue, in swift water rescue, all these different, because we have the incident within the incident. So if you get in a wreck and I have to shut down a highway, I have knowledge of those type of ops things, so I can load you up and get you to a trauma center. If we have somebody show up who doesn't have knowledge of those type of incidents, it's not within their purview, and they're used to only working in this one-dimensional wildfire only world, then they may they don't recognize that we can do that operation, or they may try to stop it. So it's important that no matter what level of government you're working in the fire service, it could be federal, it could be state, it could be local, a fire city or a county or a fire district, that we all have training in all hazard, all risk, because that's what the wildfire urban interface is. And then it becomes an urban conflagration and we're in a running firefight, but we need to be safe and competent in all those disciplines. And that's the goal and the objective. We see that as that way of going out there safe and competent, and nobody goes into burn centers or cemeteries.
The Fire Brigade Union, we are running a campaign we call DECON, and we've invested heavily to try and show the impact that fire contaminants are having on firefighters and the key link to cancer. And I think it's now become virtually established between the link to fire contamination and cancers in firefighters. I have to say, we're doing this, it's been a lonely process doing this. We've been left by ourselves to do it. And one of our aims in doing so is to try and achieve what we call presumptive legislation, i.e. the presumption that if a firefighter is diagnosed with a cancer, that came through their job, and therefore there's a job-related element to it. That's something you guys in the States already have, is it not?
We have it to different levels. There's national legislation that the IFF was successful in pushing, which really benefits the federal firefighters, but also is a benchmark for states and local government. But if you go from state to state, the presumptions are not all the same across the board. You go to California and the amount of presumptions we have may not be the same as it is in Georgia, for example. And so we have the same science that determined that it's a presumptive illness over here that was accepted, quantifiable, verifiable, but there's a struggle to get that across the board, and as I'm sure it is over there where you're at as well too. The studies have shown that when we add more staffing and we spread out the workload, the heart rates of firefighters aren't as high and the body core temperatures aren't as high. We can lessen risk of exposure to dust and smoke that contain carcinogens, contain things that will give respiratory or cardiovascular disease. We can get caught up in reacting. After you get cancer, then we treat you. But if we can shorten the duration of being on an incident because we have more staffing. If I cut down your exposure to these carcinogens from 7 days to 3, have I done something good? So while we work on respiratory protection, PPE, we can focus on staffing to have a bigger response bullpen to shorten the duration that firefighters and the public are exposed to these things that are so dangerous to their health.
No, it's interesting. It's one of the phrases we use is that it's your duty as an FBU member to leave the job better than when you found it. But
Yes.
That's been very challenging, I have to say, in recent times with the huge cuts in resources we've had. But it's one of the things, the lessons we've learned is sometimes you have to take what's right, So even when our arguments aren't getting listened to, we force the issue and put firefighter safety top of the agenda.
Yes. Every benefit or working condition that we have in the fire service was built on the backs of union activity. Nothing was given, it was earned. We have to educate, we have to negotiate, and it benefits the public too, because when your working conditions are here and these things are built in, then the private sector and everybody else benefits from those same things as well too. So our activity here is really truly an international effort that will safeguard the public in countries all over the world, not just the United States and Canada, not just firefighters. The research that we do to eliminate risk for cancer, respiratory, or cardiovascular disease, and the products we develop, those things the public will benefit from as well too. So we're constantly doing that, and that's why this collaboration that the IFF does with folks like yourself here is so important, that we do this on a unified front. And I think we're putting a dent in it every day. We're chipping away. There's good things happening, and I think even in a tragedy, there's a tremendous opportunity out of that we can seize the day on.
Joe, thanks very much. And listen, thanks for the time you've given us. Very generous of your time. And just to ram home some of these statistics of these recent fires. 51,818 emergency responses, 331 wildfires, 57,637 acres burned, and at least 29 fire fatalities. And yet the firefighters served the public throughout that whole thing. It was inspirational to see, as difficult as it was. Joe, thanks very much for the work you do over there. Thanks for working alongside the FBU and having the sort of ties that you have. And thanks very much for your time and for joining us.
It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to meeting you personally.
You and me both, Joe. Now, firefighters in the UK are already facing bigger wildfires, and the risk is growing, including in built-up areas. As the climate crisis intensifies, extreme weather events will become more and more common. That surely now is an established fact. Now, with us in the studio here at head office is Jamie Kelly, a watch manager in Portsmouth and Brigade Secretary for Hampshire and Isle and Wight. And also, in 2019, Jamie did an exchange in the United States of America in Oregon and learned about USA firefighters' methods of tackling wildfires. Jamie, welcome for joining us, and thanks for joining us actually for the very first podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me. It's really good to be here.
Now, you've been to the USA, you've learned quite a bit about wildfires, and Hampshire has clearly been badly affected over the years. In fact, only in the last few days, we've had large fires at Calshot Marshes, also at Moores Valley Country Park on the border of Dorset. So clearly big issues in Hampshire. Just give us a bit of background about that.
In the short time that I've been in the fire service, I've seen the number of wildfires grow. I worked in Basingstoke, and in the north of the county we had all of the army ranges and moorland in the north, which was massively affected probably 2 or 3 summers ago now, just constantly being deployed out to wildfires, sort of Farnborough, Aldershot way. We've also got on our west border the New Forest National Park, which again, Moores Valley and Calshot are both in that national park area, and that's getting massively impacted by the wildfires. Moores Valley, we've been called to twice in the last week because of the wildfires.
Now, we spoke to Joe earlier from the States, and we discussed the wildfires in California. Now, on the television, they seemed extraordinary. But I was very struck, speaking to Joe, the similarities that firefighters in the USA face compared with firefighters in the UK. So, for instance, he talked about the importance of having PPE, and not just one set, 2, 3 sets, because of the link to DECON. Is that an issue in Hampshire as well?
It's still an issue in Hampshire. We are getting much better at it, but we have just in the last 6 to 8 months introduced one set of wildfire kit. So we now have, as well as our structural firefighting tunic and leggings, our RTC jacket, we've got a red, much lighter weight, fire resistant leggings and tunic. But it is only one set.
Right, and is that something that you wear, obviously, when you're out in the wildfires, a lot of heat? Is this kit designed to counter that?
It's designed to be lightweight, so it's not going to be anything we could double up as a structural firefighting set. It's designed to keep us cool. We do, however, still wear our great big European-style helmets. And our welly boots, which when you're walking across uneven ground is not appropriate to protect your ankles and that sort of thing.
I think a lot of the firefighters out there be sort of curious about this. How do you, is this carried in appliance all the time? Is it kit? Is it specific kit that each firefighter puts on the wagon every time they go and shift? Yeah,
so we have, we've been issued helmet bag, which then our wildfire kit does puck down fairly small, but it goes on our trucks every time that we go out the doors.
Sounds like a bit of good practice. It needs to be rolled across the UK, yeah?
Absolutely, something that we would like to spread across the whole of the UK.
But I know everyone who's been involved in the DECON campaign, there's a sort of like flashing red light above this.
Yeah.
As good as it is, one set of kit just ain't going to cut it.
No, not at all. And when you think about how disgusting that kit is going to get when you're at a wildfire with the contaminants that are floating about, because although it's wildfire and it's, dare I use the word clean in terms of a burn, there's still so many nasties in that smoke and hot fire gases, but we also need more. Again, that summer that I referred to when I was in the north of the county, we were out every day, all day. I think one day I spent pretty much the whole shift travelling from one side of the north to the other side of the north, just dealing with the dry, scorched foliage that was around us.
Yeah. No, another issue that came up for the States, I was really struck with the parallels, is about staff numbers. I mean, I've fought wildfires. I was a firefighter in a predominantly rural county. But that was back in a time before the recent cuts, which have resulted in 12,000 firefighters getting lost. And then climate change has really kicked in. I think, any firefighter is able to advocate regarding climate change. It's what a problem it's becoming. So more wildfires, more extreme wildfires, goes on for longer. The season is getting longer, and yet staff numbers being cut. This is an issue in the UK, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I was doing a little bit of research on the train as I came up here today, and between 2022 and this year, we've had almost 100% rise in wildfires reported. So that's between January and April this year, we've got almost 100 more wildfires reported between that and January and April 2022. That's a huge amount of resources. When you think even a small fire and a minuscule fire, when you compare it to what's going on in America, but a small fire for us becomes a 10 pump job. So we're getting lots and lots of firefighters being used at those incidents. But not only that, is the relief strategies. We are under-resourced for this, and probably like every other county, every other brigade or service that we have across the country, we are losing firefighters.
Yeah, it must be a huge sense of frustration there as well, Jamie, that on the one hand we've identified, first of all, the risks associated with lack of kit and the contaminants that affect firefighters. And then at the same time, we're also battling large cuts in staff numbers whilst facing increasing amounts of fires due to climate change. I mean, is this something that you feel at a local level, a brigade level, is this hitting home with management and indeed the local politicians that are meant to oversee the service?
I don't think it is. I really don't think the resourcing of, and we'll use specifically wildfires, is hitting home. Like I say, we have had in the last week 3 wildfires across our county, and that impacts every single area and branch within our service. So being Portsmouth, we're still being tipped out to those wildfires wherever they are across the county. But in that same breath, we know that coming up for us, we've got 25 grey book positions that we are going to lose.
Why?
Because of budgetary cuts. We're underfunded. Government aren't funding us.
And that's against the background of even just recently, in the last few days, in fact,
absolutely,
large wildfires,
yeah.
which draw in resources.
Yeah, like I say, if we're looking at a 10 pump job, that's 40 minimum 40 firefighters, and then we're looking at specials and all of those other things that are coming with it. And like I say, relief strategies for us. You've got firefighters. We haven't had them, touch wood, luckily, in the UK working 48 hours. But we like to have a relief strategy of 4 hours, and that again links back to the contaminant side of things as well. We're not going to be able to sustain that.
I mean, I can hear some of our colleagues, perhaps in Scotland, in the remote areas up there, saying, "Well, 48 hours maybe not off the mark up there when you're in such a remote location, you're faced with these fires going on." But certainly, I mean, 48 hours is an extreme example. Relief has to come, and it has to come quickly in these circumstances. But unless you've got the crews available, the appliances and the resources available, it just doesn't happen, and that's got an impact on our members, hasn't it?
Oh, massively. Again, I refer back to that summer, the great summer of, I'll find a date to pin on it, but that summer of, it must have been 2022, 2023. We were having, particularly our retained colleagues as well, they were, whether that was their job that was non-fire service related or their whole-time role, and then they dual contracted, they were being on the run, going to a job, coming back, and then being tipped out almost immediately without the opportunity to decontaminate. But take the contaminants is a much bigger issue, but how tired are they going to be? And, working those ridiculous amounts of hours, it's just not safe, sustainable or healthy.
Look, it's an issue that affects everyone right across duty systems. That's why we represent all firefighters right across duty systems. And indeed for retained colleagues, they leave a workplace to respond to an emergency, perhaps getting kept there for who knows how many hours, and then they're expected to go back to work. Clearly unacceptable. Now, in fact, we talk about cuts to the whole time, which are extraordinary. Lack of pumps, lack of crewing in stations, but for the RDS, of course, we've heard of crews turning out with crews of 3. I mean, anyone who's tackled any sort of fire knows how dangerous that is, and that these cuts must create friction with management, don't they?
Oh, it's a huge amount within management. Whatever level that management is, at my junior level, that causes issue. Trying to look after my guys and girls on the fire ground, it causes issues. While you know what it's like when you're waiting for your relief crew who don't turn up on the dot, and you're getting a bit grumpy with them. But equally, we're then pushing that back up the chain, saying, look, we need these people, we need relief. But equally, that relief could be a team that had been at that fire 2 hours beforehand, and that friction is huge, isn't it? Because they're coming on tired.
I'm sure you agree, but it's really important that we make sure that the friction isn't amongst ourselves. We have to make sure that we hold the real people responsible. It's not each other.
I know. I'm really keen that whatever that is, but looking specifically at this, it's not member versus member, or even member versus non-member. The people that are out there fighting the fires are not the ones that we should be cross with or angry with. It's those making the decisions, those giving us or not giving us the money or the resources. Yeah,
it's interesting. I remember my negotiating days at a local level when I was confronting senior management about the impact of cuts. They said, you have to understand our problem. Our problem is the budget. I said, your problem's budgets. The problem for our members, of course, is going into the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. Literally when lives are at risk with a lack of resources. That's the real problem. Frankly, we don't care about your problems. You have to solve the frontline problems. It's just getting worse though, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, huge amount of things going and changing. And when I say going, when we're looking at losing that money, the budget, yes, the budget goes, but we are, and we'll use the analogy of coming onto a job tired. How can you make appropriate decisions when you're tired?
And don't forget, you're now listening to the FBU podcast. So I'm asking Jamie questions, but if you've got any questions that you want to send through at any time for future podcasts, or indeed an idea for anything we should be covering, we want to hear it. So you can drop us an email to podcast@fbu.org.uk, and please let us know for future episodes. Okay, Jamie, back to you talked about 2022 and the sort of like the extraordinary events that took place there. The union published a report into this. It's called Scorched: Firefighters and Resilience to Wildfire. It's available on the FBU website. We set out a number of issues. Most seriously, we believe, is firefighters' safety and health at wildfires. Number one, understaffing. That's an issue we've talked about, something that's hitting right across the UK. Number two, a lack of suitable PPE. And even though you've mentioned the good PPE, it's just one set of kit, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. We need more than one set. I would guess, and I'd like to think that every firefighter across the UK, and I may be wrong, has 2 sets of structural fire kit. We need at least 2 sets, or a provision to replace those sets that are used. Yeah,
and also on that list is, and it's something I do want to raise. It's we put in there about a lack of welfare facilities. Certainly, I remember being on fires, and the basics, needing to go to the toilet when you've been in an incident for 8 or 9 hours in the middle of a field. There were no facilities for us to go to the toilet. We fought hard to get what was then called a welfare unit. Then we had a battle to actually get it deployed to the incident. Are these issues that are still getting faced day in, day out by firefighters?
They're still recurring, and I'm sure it wasn't that long ago, Tam, that you were on a fireground. I don't. But
day before yesterday.
Yeah, that's it. These are still recurring. I can't remember being on a wildfire incident where those welfare provisions were given. We're not given the basic dignity to be able to go to the toilet. And as the diversity of our teams grow, we need to be able to better provide for that. Even privacy screens in a truck is not sufficient when we're looking at toilet provision.
No, that word dignity is important. I mean, if management think that a privacy screen in the back of a fire engine and you cut the mustard, they've got another thing coming, haven't they? Is this something that the union's proactively taking forward in Hampshire?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a very active women's branch, and we're really pushing that forward. Luckily, our National Women's Secretary works within our control, and every prolonged job she starts making up for welfare provision. But that's not happening across the board with every watch in Hampshire. That's not happening across the board within our region, within our countries, etc. We need to be able to push for that and drive that. Otherwise, are we getting the right people? And again, I've probably gone off on a tangent in terms of our recruitment, but again, it goes back to dignity. Do I want to work for an organisation that's going to make me have a wee next to my female colleagues, and vice versa?
In a field.
Yeah, in a field, yeah.
Now, you're going to stay with us while we're now joined by our newly elected General Secretary, Steve Wright, elected in January. And this is the first what's the first episode of the podcast, Steve? This is the first interview you've given us, the Fire Brigade Union. So I suppose the first question is, how are you finding the new job?
Well, I think it was a huge honour to be elected as the 9th General Secretary of our union, and the trust that members have placed in me following the election is a huge honour to me, and I think it's about balancing that, the representation of our members now at a national level, and providing that leadership on the key issues that are facing our members up and down the country in every fire and rescue service.
And what's it like leading the FBU now? I mean, it's clearly a change from your previous job. And just give us a bit of background regarding your previous work in the fire service.
Yeah, well, I joined the fire service in 2001, and I became a rep TAM in 2002 at the height of, or the start of the pay campaign, and that's where I cut my teeth, I suppose, as a branch rep, and I've worked my way through different roles within the union over those years, whilst being an operational firefighter in 2 fire and rescue services, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire, and leading into this role, I was the executive council member for the Southern region and the vice president. So, yeah, it's a different role, different job. But we're all here to do the same thing, represent our members, and that's what I aim to do.
Now, during the course of the election, it became clear, I mean, you've got clear family ties to the Fire and Rescue Service. I believe your dad was a firefighter before you, and of course your son's in the job. What's led to this family tradition?
Well, I'm not sure. So yeah, my dad started it in the 70s, and often talked about 1977 and the family involvement in that, and yeah, followed in his footsteps. And I think he was proud of me for following in his footsteps, and I'm clearly proud of my son who joined the service last year. And 3 generations of firefighters.
So obviously a proud FBU member as well as keeping tabs on his dad.
Certainly is, and he tells me he voted for me, which I hope he did.
Excellent. Well, Steve, you've just taken over then, so I suppose the members want to hear, look, what are your priorities for the job in the short and medium term?
Well, look, I think we face many challenges. We face challenges within our own union. We face challenges in the fire and rescue service, and I think as a union, we're part of this society that faces challenges as well. But the priorities for me have always been the same, about representing our members on the issues that affect them. And I had the privilege during my election campaign of visiting fire stations and fire control rooms, at near 100 station visits that I did in that period of time. And what I need to do and what we need to do is be reflective of the issues that are facing them on the front line, and that is around their health and safety. So I've talked about at length about making sure that firefighter safety is at the foremost of what we do as a trade union. About fighting for investment in the fire service, because when I talk to members on the station, and I've been on the front line over the last 24 years, I've experienced this. My son's experiencing it now. The reduction in investment and funding in the fire service, the cuts to the front line and the impact that's having on members. And I think that's their number one issue that has cut through to me on these visits that I've been making, Tam.
Yeah, that's something we just discussed with Jamie, that came through with our colleague from the States as well earlier. Look, it's safety, isn't it? I mean, although here we are in the fire service over 100 years since the FBU was formed, we're now getting back to fighting for the basic safety of firefighters. An appalling situation, isn't it?
Well, it is. Look, and we know the figures. We've lost 1 in 5 firefighter posts. We've lost 12,000 firefighters over the last 10 to 15 years. And austerity was the political choice of the then government that has led us to this position. But look, that cuts through. So we've now got, in some places of the UK, fire engines turning out the doors with 3 firefighters. But that is dangerous, it is unsafe, and we will continue to challenge that. But even 4 firefighters on a fire engine town, you've been there, Jamie's been there, I've been there. Look, it's serious incidents that we attend. The firefighters are telling me they are concerned that they will not be able to effect rescues at the incidents they attend. And we see the increase in incidents over the last 10 years. We see the emerging risks that we face. We're on the front line of this climate crisis, which is straining and stretching the resources that we have. So look, those cuts have cut deep. And I think it's interesting, actually, the National Fire Chiefs Council are now saying that the cuts have cut too deep. So this message from ourselves, this message from those that represent the bosses and chief fire officers, that is the same at this point in time.
Well, finally, I have to say, they've welcome to the party, Chiefs, isn't it? Because they've been the ones that have been cutting the service, not just in recent years, but for a long time. It's something that's inspired the anger, not just us here at head office, but our members right across the UK, yeah? Exactly
that, Tam. And look, this is the message that I've been pushing home from day one in this job with the Labour government. Look, we are sat around the table with the Labour government now, the Ministerial Advisory Group that has met twice, that we're in the room with those pulling the strings, with the levers of power, with the hands on their resources, to actually start investing in the fire and rescue service, start reversing the 20 years of cuts that we have faced. And I think that's the opportunity we face in front of us at the moment, to make the argument of why we need investment, why we need more firefighters, why we need national standards. So we have the firefighters like Jamie have got the right equipment, they've got the right resources, they're attending incidents in the time limits that we know are acceptable, because it's 3.5 minutes longer now for a fire engine to arrive at an incident than it was before I even joined the job in the 1990s, Tam. And look, that trajectory of travel is so dangerous, not just for the public, but also for firefighters.
No, it's certainly something when I speak to people in that 3.5 minutes. And in some ways, it might seem a short term. I'll say to people, you imagine you're in a house fire in the extra 3.5 minutes to wait. It is literally a matter of life and death. But Steve, you mentioned the new government and your meeting with Labour ministers now through this Ministerial Advisory Group. I mean, a lot of people out there will be saying, well, it might be a new government, but what's changed in policy terms? We've seen the Chancellor from day one not exactly setting forward an agenda that would inspire many. We're an affiliated union to Labour. What say are we having in regard to this? What difference are we actually, or can we actually make to this government?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's a question that our members will quite rightly be asking at the moment, Tam. But as an affiliated trade union, as a general secretary of an affiliated trade union that does give money to this party, that we are a voice, and we are a voice that is listened to, and quite rightly so, which is one of the advantages, I believe, and our conference believes at this point in time, of being an affiliated trade union. Because if you're not, you haven't got that voice in the room. So we have got that. We will be a critical friend when they do things that we don't support and we don't agree with, and quite rightly so, and we use that opportunity to do it. But what I think we have got right now, we have faced austerity. We've been frontline firefighters and seen what the previous government have done and what austerity has done to us. So I think our message is clear to the government that there cannot be no return or normalisation of austerity. Actually, you need that investment. And we are in the room, that this Ministerial Advisory Group, whilst it falls short of a statutory body, that is the direction of travel that we will be pushing and we will be taking with those ministers. We've got a new fire minister in Alex Norris, who took over on the 1st of April. We've seen one change which we have supported as a union, from fire falling under the Home Office to now fitting and sitting under the MHCLG.
Yeah, just tell us why you think that's this change of department. Why is that important?
Well, it's important because I think fundamentally we become a bigger fish in a smaller pond in the MHCLG. I think there are crossovers with housing. This was a recommendation from the Grenfell Tower Phase 2 report, which we supported and we backed. So I think it gives us more of an opportunity. The Home Office route, but that was forged and forced through from the previous government to align us more with the police. We saw the white paper in 2022, Tam, which we all campaigned against, where it was aligning firefighters with a role as police officers. And that is where the Home Office sits, overseeing police and fire. We've seen that with the HMI, CFRS audits. So look, this is an opportunity for us. 1st of April, we fall in line with that department. And I think it's an opportunity now for us to make our case as a union, make our case for the future of the fire and rescue service, so that we are fit for purpose, we are responding, and we're funded and invested to do the job that we all want to do safely and effectively.
It's interesting because we talked earlier with Jamie about politics. Actually, Jamie, just on that issue, I mean, you represent Hampshire and Isle and Wight. Is there a view amongst members regarding the current government? Is there hope for change amongst our members?
There's hope for change. I think if you look across the board, it couldn't have got much worse for us, could it? And but with our fingers are firmly crossed, there's real hope that Labour will be able to make those changes. And like Steve, we echo the change of department from the Home Office. We're not police officers. No. We don't have the same terms and conditions as police officers, or the same working rights as police officers. We need to be managed differently.
Now, and again, actually, Steve, back to you. We talked earlier with Jamie about the impact of crew, and you mentioned 3 in a pump. I mean, some of us were on duty when the incident in Blaina happened, the same weekend as a firefighter in Avon Fleur Lombard was killed in a flashover. But the Blaina fire, again, a fire event that occurred, but lack of crew numbers there at that time was a key part of the report into their deaths. Now, that was, I believe, 4 firefighters in that appliance at a house fire. You're talking about 3 in a pump. I mean, that clearly is unsafe and unsustainable. What are we as a union doing about this? What are we saying to members who are getting put in that position?
Well, look, Tam, those 2 incidents, and when I joined the fire service in 2001, these were incidents that were talked about and lessons need to be learned. But if you look back to that period of time, there are 20,000 more firefighters. And I talked about the 3.5 minutes longer to get to an incident. So back in those days, firefighters were getting to incidents quicker. So that what we're doing is that we are highlighting these safety issues that exist. That we all know that crews of 3 is unsafe. And in many examples, a crew of 4 is unsafe. You need 5 firefighters on a fire engine, as you know, to perform the roles that are needed. A vast array of incidents, not just house fires, but attending road traffic collisions, chemical incidents. The incidents that we attend, you need the right people in the right place in a timely manner to effect rescue, save life and save property.
I can hear the voices of members listening to this now saying, yeah, but it's happening now on the station. And actually I said, what's our message to members? Perhaps for you as the General Secretary, what's your message to Chief Fire Officers that are sending our members to incidents with 3 in a pump? What would you say to them?
Well, look, most chief officers, Tam, that they've ridden fire engines, not in all cases, but they've ridden. And if they can truly look themselves in the mirror and think this is a safe example of what we should be doing, well, I'd like to have those conversations with them. That our members are quite clear. When they come to our conference, this is unacceptable. And look, I've been in the job for 12 weeks. This is a number one priority for me. You all have seen that, Tam. You're working on stuff with me as a national officer and organising. And look, we need to take this on and take it seriously. And I hope that chief officers will start looking at this. But we need investment. We need more firefighters, and let's starting to fix the fire and rescue service for the future.
Now, the sort of theme of this podcast has been wildfires. We spoke to Jamie, and before Jamie, to Joe from the States about the impact that wildfires are having. Huge incidents occurring in California, but also, of course, in the UK. And even at this early point in the year, we've seen substantial wildfires, not just in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, but across Dorset and Wiltshire, and even in Scotland, up in Grampian, big wildfires. Are we taking this message to government about the impact, first of all, that climate change is having, not just in communities, but the fire and rescue service, and then added to it, the lack of crew and lack of resources that our members are faced with when trying to deal with these increasing incidents?
Well, we are, Tam. The answer is yes, we are taking that. We've taken that to the Ministerial Advisory Group. We've taken it to the civil servants working in these departments. And we're raising it continually. And the reason we're raising it continually is as you've said, look, we're in the first week of April and we've seen significant fires in all four corners of the UK. The first week of April, we're not at the height of summer. Let's just look back to 2022 when London Fire Brigade talked about the busiest day since the Blitz. We saw a whole street of houses taken out. And I think this is the issue really. And we've seen it with LA. This is spreading into urban areas. We've had it in the UK. We've had it in London, where these wildfires are spread into urban areas. This is putting lives at risk. London Fire Brigade were overstretched and under-resourced in 2022 to deal with those incidents. And that is widespread across the UK. There's the story which has been told at our Executive Council, Tam, you'll recall, that a fire engine in the eastern part of this country was taken out of a museum to respond to an incident. And
again, they've been the front line of cuts. Whenever we've seen these so-called combinations, it seems to me the first thing that's gone is a control room. Huge pressure on these members, yeah?
Oh, massively so. And I visited a number of control rooms and will continue to do that in my term as the General Secretary. And the issues they raise with me, Tam, that there is not enough of them in those control rooms. They can't take their regular breaks. They're often working in environments that are not conducive to the emergency control room and the nature of the incidents that they're dealing with. So look, we do need to understand that. We're working closely with our CSNC control section to establish the risks that our members face up and down the country. And look, Jamie's done some work on that within the control room, within Hampshire and across the region, with the merged control room in the Thames Valley. We know these issues exist. We know they're on the front line of dealing with wildfires and other incidents. And yeah, look, Tam, we want to get to grips with that.
So you dealt with a control room merger, Jamie, yeah?
I haven't dealt with that, but it's something that has been on our radar within Hampshire. Right. And within my region, the southern region, we've got a merged control room. So Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire, the Thames Valley region is a merged control room.
Right. You talk about merger. I take it what happened was they closed the number of control rooms, said they were bringing it into one. Is it the same number of jobs?
I wasn't involved in that side of it, but it would be a no.
Yeah. It's straightforward. So, language is important. They talk about mergers, it's cuts, isn't it?
It's cuts.
Cuts to people who are taking not just answering calls, but giving life-saving advice at the end of a phone as well. Steve, you talked about the wildfires we face, and we discussed this with Jamie earlier, and one of the big concerns that came up through Jamie is welfare. It's not just resources that we need in terms of fire, it's dignity as well. We're trying to fight for members' safety, yes, but there has to be a basic dignity at work. And we've heard stories of firefighters who can't go to the toilet unless it's in a bush or the side of a road whilst fighting these fires. An extraordinary situation to still be in. There has to be anger there about this, isn't there?
Oh, definitely so. This is raised meeting after meeting. And look, when we talk about these cuts over the past 10, 15 years' time, this has been cuts not just to the front line or to our control rooms. This has been to other areas. And this is one of those areas that's not been invested in. And you've been at conference town when these issues have been raised and members talk quite openly about that their dignity being compromised at the incidents they attend. And the wildfires, that these are often in the middle of nowhere. They do spread to urban areas, as I said, but they're often in the middle of nowhere. We need to make sure the right resources are attending those incidents. And I think what sits alongside that is, with the climate crisis that we find ourselves in, the increase in flooding incidents. That again, we need to make sure that welfare, DECON, all these arrangements are in place for these large-scale, resource-heavy incidents that firefighters are attending.
Is this something that we are taking forward to politicians? I mean, it's always struck me that if a chair of a fire authority had to go and pee in a bush next to colleagues, or had to change a tampon in the back of a fire engine, things would soon change. But of course, they're not seeing this. Are we making sure this is heard at the highest level, Steve?
100%, Tam. And look, this leads into national standards, doesn't it? And look, when we talk about national standards, it's not just about response times. It's not just about the amount of firefighters on fire engines. That this is also about a national standard for welfare, a national standard, importantly, around mental health provisions in the fire and rescue service. We've launched our survey on this to gather that information, to take that to politicians.
Now, both Jamie and, interestingly, Joe as well, raised the issue of decontaminants or contamination and the way we decontaminate after fires. Just as serious on wildfires as any other incident. And we heard from Joe in the States, the work that's been going on there. In the UK, it's been the Fire Brigades Union that's been at the forefront of this, raising the issue of the impact of contamination and the link to cancers around firefighters. We call that campaign DECON, run solely by the FBU. It's having an impact, Steve, isn't it? But where are we with it?
Yeah, it certainly is. And look, I think we should all be proud of the progress we've made. But look, it needs to go further, Tam. And look, you mentioned my son joining the job and going through his training course and the first few incidents that he attended. And look, there's still much more to do. I often look back over my career and chat to firefighters that have been in the service for some time, like yourself, Tam. And what we've been exposed to can probably not be fixed. But this is about the fight for the next generation. Yeah. And that's why DECON needs to be embedded on every single fire station up and down the country. And look, Jamie's been part of this within our region. We've been taking that fight on. In fact, and Jamie will probably talk about it a little bit more, a new station in Hampshire, Cosham Fire Station, that has been built on the principles that have been set out from the UCLAN and the work of Anna Stett.
Yeah, let's hear this. So Cosham Fire Station built around these principles, Jamie.
So we've got two new stations actually within Hampshire built around the principles. One is a retained station in Bishop's Waltham, so a more rural station. But our newest, dare I say, flagship station built around these principles is Cosham. It's 3 stories tall. We have a RAG rating, so a red, amber, green rating for each area of our fire station. So as soon as you come off the fire ground, we have some DECON principles which are being embedded by Robbie Burns, who is our service lead and leading within the FBU as well on those things. But you come off a fire engine and you walk into a red area is where you de-kit. You pick up your wash kit, which you've already stowed in a locker.
And is this in the appliance bay?
Just off to the side. So you go into the building then, but each part of that building is essentially like an airlock. Airlock sounds much sexier, doesn't it? And sounds like things go whoosh as you close doors.
Please tell me they do.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. Yeah, there's the shh noise. But you go into that airlock area. You then cannot progress, or should not progress. I don't think we're that technologically advanced yet, but you will not progress until you have stripped your kit off, picked up your wash kit. You then progress into the showers, which are decontamination showers. They're not your standard showers that I come in from my cycle into work and then I have a shower. It's a different designated shower, because we know that when we're washing after a dirty job, then we are washing those contaminants into the shower tray, onto the shower curtain, etc., etc. You then wash, dry yourself. You can then move into the amber area where you can then pick up your fresh kit. The amber area is also where the appliances are, the fire engines are. And they're only then, once everything is clean as it possibly can be, we will then progress into a green area. Those green areas are our dorms, the living areas, the TV room, the kitchens. Those are the offices. They are green areas. Every door within our fire station, and this is our flagship gold standard fire station is then stickered to say you are entering a green area, no fire kit. You are entering an amber area. This is what you're allowed.
No, look, DECON's about saving lives, our lives, isn't it? But
absolutely.
Let's see how did this happen? The fire brigade. This is an FBU.
This is an FBU campaign. Like you keep referring to it, DECON. This is all off the back of DECON.
This sounds pretty impressive, Steve. But at the same time, it was only last week we were hearing about some fire stations without running water. But a bit of good practice there, yeah?
Good practice, but look, none of this would have been possible or achieved, actually, without the Fire Brigade Union, Tam. It was our research funded by the Firefighters 100 lottery. This research funded by ourselves, Tam. That our campaign has achieved this, the DECON campaign, and our reps raising these issues continually for some time, I'd say, on health and safety committees, raising this with the bosses about doing more. So, look, great progress. But there are 1,000 other fire stations that are severely lacking in these areas. But I think we need to be mindful, actually, that when we do take something on, we do lead on these issues. It took a long time for others to follow, including the National Fire Chiefs Council, including the bosses. And in many cases, we've had barriers put up in front of us. So it does take hard work. It does take some determination to get these things across the line.
You just heard about DECON, a campaign getting run to save the lives of firefighters by the Fire Brigade Union. You can support that work by playing the Firefighters 100 lottery. By doing so, you'll be funding this campaign and you'll also be supporting injured firefighters. And it helps us commission this game-changing research into cancer and fire contaminants. You're listening to the FBU podcast. Don't forget, if you've got a story for a future episode or an idea for what we should be covering, we want to hear it. So please drop us an email to podcast@fbu.org.uk. That's podcast@fbu.org.uk. And please let us know. Now, Steve, no FBU member would allow me to let this conversation pass without raising the issue of pay. Safety is critical in our service. We're a life-saving emergency service. The job that we do obviously saves lives, protects property, and impacts positively in the community. But we've also got families, we've got houses, we've got mortgages that we have to fund. And pay is a number one issue. Huge impact in pay over the decades of austerity. We've had to fight to start clawing that back. What's the plans for the future? The pay round's coming up, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right to raise it, Tam. And look, it is a top priority of mine. It's a top priority of every member across the UK. And you're right. Look, we've faced 15 years of pay restraints, the pay freeze, that severely impacted our members. And look, we've all lived through the cost of living crisis. So we're continually making the case for investment, but also the pay of firefighters. And you're right, we're in that period now of negotiating on pay. We have collective bargaining. Unlike many other industries, like many other trade unions who don't have that, we fight for that so we can be sat around the table to make the case for firefighters on pay. And that's what we're doing at the moment. Look, we know the issues that we see, and we're just seeing them this week with the tariffs and the chaos that Trump is causing. We know the economic situation we find ourselves in the UK and globally. But look, pay will always be a priority for our union. We're a campaigning union on pay and our terms and conditions, and we're sat at the National Joint Council making that case continually, Tam.
And Steve, specifically, what about pay this year? I mean, how does it start? What's the process? Who decides?
Yeah, Tam, so a pay claim letter was sent in by the union, agreed by the Executive Council in December. And I suppose that's the start of the process. But we've then had subsequent detailed negotiations at the National Joint Council with the employers and ourselves. And look, it is only the Fire Brigade Union that is in that room discussing pay of our members. So we're in the middle of that process. But what I will say is any offer that comes to the union that will go to the Executive Council will be put to our members in a democratic decision of them, like has been done in years gone by. So what I would urge members is over the next period of time, meetings will be called by their officials, by their branch reps and brigade officials to discuss pay. So I'd urge members, get around those tables, have those discussions on watches in your stations and in your control rooms, because any offer that comes to our table will be put in front of the members.
Just for members who are out there listening to this, perhaps in fire stations or in control rooms, just set out what the National Joint Council is. We talk about it a lot up at head office and throughout the work as union officials, but let's connect it to the members that are listening. What is the NJC? What does it do? And what's our role on it?
Well, look, I start by saying, look, the National Joint Council and collective bargaining that I mentioned was being attacked by the last government, that they wanted to take that away from us. The reason they wanted to take that away from us is it can deliver for our members, that we sit around that table. And Tam, you've been there a lot longer than I have sat around that table, making the arguments of firefighting.
You keep saying this, Steve. I'm young at heart.
Agreeing terms and conditions, fighting for better pay. And many other people have pay review bodies. And we made a big thing of this actually during the Fair Pay Fire Strike campaign in 22-23, where workers will have their pay imposed on them and have to try and fight. And look, we sit around the table, we negotiate, and we bargain for our pay. And we're quite unique in that regard, and that's why we've always defended it. So the National Joint Council is there. That we're taking a review of the Grey Book, actually, Tam, to look at all of that, and that's what it can do. It can deliver on some of these areas. We've seen in the past it's delivered on increasing maternity pay, increasing pay for our RDS members. So that's what the work it can do, and that's why we've always protected it.
Be a big issue in Hampshire, Jamie?
I'm not saying we're the most expensive place to live, but we are an expensive place to live, one of the most expensive places to live. We're on the commuter belt. We are in an extremely desirable area to live on the south coast. House prices are extortionate. So, pay is really close to every member, but every member within Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, it's close to their hearts. We're also trying to fight for a regional allowance or a weighting, similar to Hampshire Police get a weighting for working in the Hampshire area because it's acknowledged how expensive it is to live.
Yeah, so pay is a big issue right across the UK. Actually, just a reflection, and Steve mentioned the last campaign we had. I mean, the pay rises that were achieved there, they weren't offered to us, were we? We had to take them. There was a big impact right across the UK, Jamie, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was divisive in some respects across our membership. However, we fought for it and we got it. Yeah. We were offered, and I can't remember what a small amount we were offered, but we fought for it and we got a much bigger amount. But again, going back to the conversations we've had, that's because of the union. Everyone benefits from it, but the union have fought for that.
No, absolutely. And talk about fighting and winning, Steve. The other big issue that's every time we go to a branch meeting, a fire station, every time I meet a firefighter, wherever it may well be, the issue of pensions come up. Big campaign run by the union following one of the most disgraceful attacks on firefighters we've seen from a Tory government. Slashing their pensions, increasing the pension age to, in many respects, to an age that some firefighters can't possibly reach. We took them on legally, we won, yet still we're waiting for a final outcome, final justice for many members. Have we got an update on this?
Yeah, well, I think what I start with is the fantastic work that National Officer Mark Rowe has done on all of this, and that our members will be well versed in some of these issues, and they'll have read the extensive circulars that Mark Rowe has provided to them. And look, I think the government came and attacked us, and we're still fighting back. We've had a number of victories along the way, Tam, and that we continue to do that. We'll have seen the latest that has been circulated by the union with the RSS pension statements, and that is an outrage, which is why on the 1st of April, when that date was exceeded and passed, I wrote to Angela Rayner to demand a meeting, to demand that this is fixed and actually we get around the table and do this. And I think that's kind of feeds into our relationship with the Labour Party. We are able to raise these concerns with them, get around the table and sort that. So I've had meetings with Mark Rowe. Yeah, Tam, Mark is over the detail on this, and we're going to make sure that we're going to be taking this to government and elsewhere.
Absolutely. You just mentioned you've written to Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister. She's been driving forward what's called an Employment Rights Bill. I know some people might switch off at this, but it's a hugely important piece of legislation because the way that trade unions can fight on behalf of members is really shackled legally. You know, we've got ballot thresholds, we've got to jump over hurdles, jump through hoops, you name it, unions have to do it before we can even start to fight Labour promised changes. We're still waiting, Steve, aren't we? Is this something that's getting raised at your level?
Yeah, it is, Tam. And look, we, as an affiliated trade union, 11 of us, we've had a number of meetings with the other general secretaries about what this means. And a significant piece of legislation, actually. When you think from the 1980s, trade unions have been attacked. And this is the first piece of legislation that even sets a pathway to trying to fix some of that. And look, it may not go far enough in some cases. It currently sits in the House of Lords with a number of amendments being made, which is why we're being vocal, which is why we're having meetings at the Trade Union Congress about it, which is why we're having meetings with the other affiliated unions to actually discuss what this is, that there can be no watering down. When you think of 0-hour contracts and the impact that has on workers, on fire and rehire, and all the other issues that it encompasses. I think the number one issue for us, and has been, and we talked at length about this in the Fair Pay Fire Strike campaign, was about the right to strike. So look, that has been stripped off for future workers. That will be a massive benefit. But the 2016 Trade Union Act, look, the things that you talk about in that, Tam, will severely hamper us as a trade union. That is why we are still vocal, and we will be continually while this moves through the different, through the laws, through the House of Commons, before it comes to the statute book, to fight for better arrangements on that.
You talk about the right to strike. I mean, it's the right to withdraw your labour. And if you haven't got that right, you're not a worker, are you? You're a slave. So it's something certainly we have to fight for. Now, we've covered, Steve, wide area. We've talked about pay. We've talked about pensions. One of the big themes that you've been driving forward since you've been up here, in the short period you've been up here, is organising. Now, in trade union terms, that means many things. Tell us what you mean by organising within the Fire Brigade Union.
Well, look, I think it's about having our relevance and our voice on each and every fire station across the UK, whether that's in the Highlands of Scotland or down in Cornwall or across any part of London. That is about making sure that we're organised at all levels of our union. And we've got structures. And I often talk about the General Secretaries underneath all our structures, with our branch officials, with our sectional reps. So it's about having those structures in place, our voice on every fire station, and making sure we're the relevant party in the room, Tam. Organising around meetings, organising so our members are up to date on the issues. But importantly, have the opportunity to raise their issues through the structures, to have those decisions made for our Parliament of the Union at conference, so actually we can deliver on those issues. So organising is all of that. It's about making sure that we are the relevant party in the fire and rescue service, the voice of firefighters in each and every quarter of the UK.
And with that, our time is up. Thank you to all our guests, Joe, Jamie and Steve, and to everyone out there who's tuned in. Thanks for listening. Listen, this is your podcast, and we do want to hear from you. What do you think we should be covering? What stories should we be picking up? Or any questions you want to ask our guests? Just drop us a line. You can write to podcast@fbu.org.uk. That's podcast@fbu.org.uk, and I can assure you we'll be reading your emails and we'll pick up on your comments. But for now, thanks to our guests, goodbye, and stay tuned for the future.